Alrighty, welcome everybody to some mini Econ chats where we're going to be breaking down some of the topics, some of the concepts, and trying to do it much quicker than we have before. So this mini Econ chat is going to be dealing primarily with macroeconomics. And what I want to do is kind of give a brief overview of macroeconomics, but at the same time, like I said, just break down a little bit of these concepts a little quicker and in a little bit shorter fashion. So real quick, make sure you take a look at this standard. It goes something like this. SSEMA1 says for you to illustrate the means by which economic activity is measured. And that's one of the things that you need to understand about macroeconomics. It's basically just taking a step back, whereas in microeconomics, you're kind of looking at the economies underneath a microscope and seeing all the interactions of businesses and individuals and how they set prices and how they interact and the flow of money and then how those businesses are organized and the markets in which those businesses are existing, how they are structured. Instead, with macroeconomics, we take a step back, We take a step back in macroeconomics and we look and see, hey, how is the economy doing? Now with that, you take a look. SSEMA 1A tells you to identify and describe the macroeconomic goals of steady economic growth, stable prices, and full employment. But see, that's another thing. Macroeconomics, we want to take a look at how is the economy doing, and then we're going to ultimately decide, all right, well, what do we need to do? So those ideas of stable prices, the idea of economic growth, and then trying to get full employment, that is one of the things that can tell us, or those are some of the things that can tell us how the economy is doing. But then, what do we do to make sure we promote that? With B, you have to be able to define gross domestic product as the sum of consumer spending, investment, government spending, and net exports. We'll get to that. Then you have C, which is defining unemployment rate, as well as consumer price index, inflation, real GDP, aggregate supply, and aggregate demand, and explain how each is used to evaluate the macroeconomic goals. And then we have E, which tells you to identify seasonal, structural, cyclical, and frictional unemployment, and then F, defining the stages of the business cycle. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of different stuff here. What I want to do, though, is make sure that you have gross domestic product. Now, again, these are some of these indicators, things that you may need to look at to see how the economy is doing. We're going to take a track of poverty, for example. Then we're going to look at, as you can see, gross domestic product, unemployment rate, inflation, aggregate supply and demand. And then you may also, in order to get an idea of how the economy is doing, may want to look at the national debt. But of course, these are all different things that can tell us how the economy is doing. We're going to be looking at a few of them based on the standards. So let's go ahead and start now. First indicator, the big one, the one that is oftentimes referred to as the economic heartbeat of an economy, is GDP, gross domestic product. And here's the thing about GDP. Not only is it such an important indicator because it can really give us an insight into how the economy is doing, but for you to understand what it is, you just need to know what these words mean. So gross, obviously what we're talking about is total. Then we're looking at the product, meaning what's being produced. And so domestically, of course, we're talking about home. Now the definition that you want to be looking for gross domestic product, what we're talking about is the total dollar value of all goods and services created in an economy in a year. So if we're looking at the dollar value of everything created in an economy and in a year, that's what we consider gross domestic product. And again, remember, this is an indicator, something that can tell us how the economy is doing. So if it looks like our GDP is increasing, it means that we are dollar-wise producing more. That could be an indicator that our economy is doing well because we're producing more, businesses are working, people are working in those businesses, factories are churning out equipment and goods and services and all of that other good stuff. So an increasing GDP could be a good thing. Likewise, if we see GDP begin to fall where we're not producing as much, obviously that could be an indicator that says that factories are closing, that businesses are closing, that people therefore aren't working. It could be an indicator that the economy is falling as well as a whole. So GDP, total dollar value of all goods and services created in a country in a year. Now, of course, that dollar value, you should maybe think ahead of time. You might be thinking, well, that can be a little different. Maybe something like inflation. For example, you may have the old person in your family that can tell you that back in their day, they were able to go to the movies, fill up their gas, fill up their car with a gas, and buy a house all for like $8. That things cost less back then. It always does. And so in order to keep that rates of inflation straight, we use what's known as real GDP. And the thing that you just need to understand about real GDP is that it's a more realistic number. What does it do? What does it do? It takes prices into effect. It takes the idea that there are going to be price changes, and therefore it may seem, if we have inflation, it may seem that we're producing more, but in reality, things just cost more. So real GDP basically is just a more realistic version, and it takes current price changes into account. It tracks what those are and gives us, again, a more realistic number of what GDP is. How much are we producing? But of course, the last thing that you need to understand, as it was mentioned in your standards, is the formula for determining GDP. Because when you think about it, GDP, the total dollar value of everything created in an economy in a year. I mean, the current GDP, or the GDP for the United States in 2016, was well over $18 trillion. There is nobody sitting at a desk in Washington, D.C. with a calculator going, well, we're going to carry the one here, and then we're going to add this, and then we're going to do this, and then there you go, $18 trillion. It's all an estimate. There's really no way to completely get the actual dollar value of everything produced in our country in a whole year. Instead, we estimate, and we do that by following this somewhat simple formula. C, though, stands for consumption. And what we're looking here is consumption. We're looking for household purchases, new products purchased by households in a year. We get that total dollar amount. Then we come up to I, which is standing for investment. We're looking at business purchases. Again, new products, new stuff for businesses. And again, if you buy a 2008 truck, it counted in 2008. We're not producing it again. So if a business such as a landscape company purchases a 2008 truck, that won't count. But if they purchase a 2018 truck in 2018, that's when it counted. Same thing with used and new products in consumption. Household products, we're not really concerned with products that are just being bought and sold. We're trying to get an idea of how much is being produced. We keep track of the new stuff that households buy. So we take the new stuff that households purchase, we add it to the stuff that businesses purchase, which means that G obviously is going to stand for our friend, the government. Government purchases. But here's the thing, not everything. Nope, we don't count these things called transfer payments. Transfer payments, you should recall, is something like welfare, Social Security, where we are transferring money from one group of one part of the population to a part of the population who needs it. But here's the reason we don't count welfare and Social Security here. It's because we're already counting it here. These households, we're not really sure where you get your money from. It doesn't really matter. You can get it from your job, you can get it from your friend, you can get it from the government, but we're just counting what you're spending your money on. But if we counted it again here, that again would give us not a very accurate number, or it would swell our GDP number, and we really want to find out how good is our economy doing. So we take a look at what households spend, we add it to what businesses are buying, again, new products for both, and we look in again for government purchases minus transfer payments, but that gets us to XDN, which stands for net exports. And for net exports, guys, what we're looking at is the dollar value of our exports, or what we sell to other countries, minus the dollar value of our imports, or what we buy from other countries. And that's what's going to give us our net export number. All right? Now, here's the thing about this one. If we purchase more from other countries than we sell to them, which is what the United States does, we purchase or import more than we export or sell, this number is going to be negative. And this number has always been negative, primarily for most of my life, absolutely for probably all of your life, that this number has been negative because we buy or import more than we sell. Now, which one of these numbers is going to be the largest? Well, here in the United States, this is the largest. That is the largest number. And that's a good thing because that means that we are outspending. It's not the government. That would be more of a North Korea type kind of country, that they're the ones that are spending more money. So what do? In order to figure out GDP, we take a look at what households spend money on, the new products. We add it to whatever new products the businesses are spending money on. We add that to government spending minus transfer payments. Then we figure out, hey, how much are we exporting and importing. C is the largest number. XN is going to be the only negative number. And all of that is how we figure out GDP. If you have any problems, any questions, or anything, make sure you let somebody know. Take care of yourself. We'll see you next time.